Welcome everyone! The goal of this video is to help you gain clarity around whether a UBC Behavioral Research Ethics Board application is required for your teaching and learning project. Before we get started, here are some terms to familiarize yourself with. First, BREB. This stands for the Behavioral Research Ethics Board, the committee that oversees human behavior research at UBC. Second, QA and QI, which stands for Quality Assurance and Quality Improvement. BREB uses these terms for projects that do not require BREB approval. Finally, research. This is defined by Canada's Tri-Council policy statement as an undertaking intended to extend knowledge through a disciplined inquiry or systematic investigation. Teaching and learning inquiries deemed as research require formal ethics review. QA and QI projects cannot be called research. In this video, we will distinguish between teaching and learning projects that require BREB approval and those that do not. Teaching and learning projects that require BREB approval can often look similar to projects that do not require BREB approval in terms of questions, scope, methods, and analysis. So how do you determine if your project requires BREB approval? In the next few minutes, we'll walk you through what distinguishes these two types of projects and guidelines for being ethical in your projects, regardless of the requirement for ethics approval from UBC's Behavioral Research Ethics Board. One of the most critical things to consider in your project is your intent, or purpose for doing the project. Once you have identified a focus of inquiry, we encourage you to spend time thinking about your primary intent for the work that you're about to do. Projects that are conducted exclusively for the purpose of assessing and improving learning activities and teaching practice do not require BREB approval. These projects may build on prior theory or relate findings to existing literature, but theory is not a guiding piece in the same way that it is for research projects. Under this category, projects focus more on understanding best practices and improving student learning and your own teaching, usually within a specific course. In contrast, a project with a research intent aims at deepening understanding of student learning and teaching practice beyond the specific context where the inquiry takes place. Research projects in teaching and learning intend to generalize findings to other contexts and add to the body of knowledge on, for instance, specific disciplines or particular pedagogies. Theory is integrated heavily into the study plan as it drives the focus of the inquiry and also the methodology used. Here, the goal is not only to improve student learning within your context, but to be able to make claims about learning and teaching beyond your specific context. Research projects always require BREB approval. As an example, let's imagine that you are conducting a project in a large enrollment first-year course that you are teaching because you're interested in finding out how a new learning activity is impacting your students' motivation and engagement with the content. If your plan is to utilize your findings to revise the learning activity and adjust your teaching of the course where the inquiry is taking place, this would not require BREB review. If your intent is to support generalizations about first-year learning activities beyond the particular population participating, your project would fall within the research category. Intent is a key determinant of whether BREB approval should be obtained. Please give yourself time to reflect and decide on what you aim to achieve before you embark on any teaching and learning inquiry. It is important to note that, in our experience, some projects that are initiated without a research intent end up evolving into research projects because during the course of the project or after obtaining results, instructors' curiosity and interests extend beyond their classroom practice. However, turning a teaching inquiry project into a research project comes with many challenges, including ethical issues. As soon as a research intent develops, you must proceed with a BREB application. Sometimes it happens that you collect some data and begin to think, actually, there's something bigger or more interesting than I anticipated happening here. At that point, you should consult with the BREB office and begin an ethics application because there's no such thing as retroactive BREB approvals. You may be able to use your data by completing an ethics application for secondary use of data. However, it is incredibly challenging to obtain consent from students for this usage once the semester has ended, and a waiver for consent can be difficult to justify. It is also important to consider how your project will impact students in your classroom. Many teaching and learning projects use surveys, focus groups, and/or interviews to understand impact or experiences. These activities require minimal student involvement outside the classroom, and when used for projects with no research intent, do not require a BREB application. For projects where student activities and expectations are also impacted by experimental designs, control groups, or other types of differential treatments, BREB approval must be obtained. An example of this would be experimental designs where students are randomized into groups to compare teaching or learning practices, such as providing access to a course website to one group of students and not another group. Any project where the student learning experience might be differentially impacted as a result of randomization or experimental groups should undergo consultation with the Behavioral Research Ethics Board. The final consideration is related to making your findings public. It is often believed that the deciding factor for whether BREB approval is needed is the intent to publish. However, this is not the case. The real factor is why, what, and how you want to publish, again relating to intent, theory, and context. With projects that do not require BREB approval, any form of dissemination is allowed and encouraged. However, be mindful not to present your work as research by avoiding terms such as research project, principal investigator, or participants. Do use terms such as inquiry, instructor, and students. Generally, non-research teaching and learning works are more reflective in nature. With research, publishing is one of the driving goals because the intent is to extend theoretical literature or generalize findings beyond your specific context. When publishing work in an academic journal, you may be asked if you've received institutional research ethics approval, and it's fine to say no if your project was not required to undergo BREB review. However, you will need to clearly state that based on the Canadian policy framework, the activities or practice falls under quality assurance activities and doesn't require institutional ethics review. It is important to remember that even if a BREB application is not deemed necessary, you still need to conduct yourself in ethical ways with respect to your interaction with students and the data you may collect from them. Obtaining student consent through a formal consent form for using any of their data is strongly recommended. Be transparent with students about the details of the study and be sure to communicate to them what data you'll be using, whether from survey or interview collection or course-related data such as grades. If and how data will be shared publicly, and data storage and confidentiality, including who will possess their data and how anonymity will be ensured. It is also really important to consider the role of vulnerability and coercion when requesting students to participate in any project. As part of your project plan, consider who should ask for consent and collect the data. The instructor typically shouldn't have access to primary data, such as interview recordings and/or participants' identities. A research assistant or TA may be a good option for helping you collect and manage data from your students. By informing students of your project goals and your intentions around course or program improvement, they are more likely to participate in your study since they can understand how and why their data will be used. At the bottom of the presentation slide, we have links to sample consent forms for a variety of project formats. We encourage you to review them and adapt as needed for your context. Finally, we'd like to remind you that everything is contextual. Each project has its own motives, framework, and design. Hopefully, the information we share today helps you in deciding whether institutional ethics approval is needed for your project, but we always invite you to connect with the Institute for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, as well as the Office of Research Ethics, to get further clarity for your specific project. Thank you for watching.